Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Data Garden course. Welcome to the second half. If you have made it this far, I just wanted to say thank you for, doing modules 1 to 3. Hopefully you had a lot of fun as well. In those modules, we covered, drawing and just some of the basic techniques of P5JS. And so well done to all of you. And so I'm really excited to get into the second half of the course, modules 4 to 6, which will really be driven by your DataVis project and what you want to do. And I suppose before we get into those modules, I thought I would also introduce you to the project that made all of this happen. So what led to the Data Garden project, a bit of a backstory of how it came to be, and also how it all ties into the modules that we'll be going through in the next few weeks. You might have seen this project already if you've come across the Data Garden project before, but so just thought I'd show you in greater detail of kind of where the conception of Data Garden project came to be. So this was actually a DataVis artwork that I made in university. It was in an elective titled Visualizing Data Through Art, taught and led by Karen Ann Donaghy, who is kind enough to still act as mentor, a brilliant mentor to me and the project in general today. A little bit about this artwork, I suppose. So this is a visual representation of 30 days of text messages via WhatsApp between me and my mother, between my mother and I, grammar, spanned across 30 days, so from March till April of 2020, aka the first month of the pandemic. So I built this, as you would expect, I built this using P5JS, and it now lives as a GitHub page, and we're going to cover that in Module 6 of how you can publish it on GitHub pages. Super easy, super straightforward. But yeah, so a look into this garden in greater detail spans across 30 days, 31 days actually. And every stem is a day of dialogue. Every leaf is a text message. So the leaves that go right represent my mother's texts, and the leaves that go left are my texts. So I basically used a simple Microsoft Excel functions to help my P5 program detect where those text messages are and produce these little leaf stickers in each one. And then the bigger flowers, so the yellow flowers symbolize days where my mother spoke the most in that one day. And then the red flowers are where I spoke more in that one day. And actually, fun fact, I later realized after making this that there are more days where I spoke more than days where my mother spoke more. So there are more red flowers than yellow flowers. And so I've been having this thought of like, maybe I should retitle it into a garden of my concerns. But anyway, yeah. So what I wanted to raise with this DataVis was I wanted to use data to capture a snapshot of our relationship, but also the smaller flowers represent certain patterns or nuances in those text messages. And I focus mainly on basically the themes that would come up because, we were away, we were isolated. So things like, asking each other questions, or sending prayers, or saying something along the lines of take care of yourself or take care. And so that's basically the project, the first ever P5 project that I made, the first ever more intensive creative coding meshed with data visualization project. Okay, so how did that lead to the wider Data Garden project in general? After I made that, I suppose my thought or my path could have gone two ways. I could either have ventured off to strive to become the best, most expert, most creative coder in the world, or I could make this little knowledge I have as accessible as possible of turning data into flowers using P5JS. Like very, very simple and very like that's it. That's basically all I know. and I could work to make it as accessible and as easy and light and fun as possible to other people. And I chose that route. And so the main motivation has been to rally each other into learning together. That is the whole ethos and the whole, the core of the Data Garden project. And this is what I'm in the middle of right now. This is an example of how it has come about so far. And so this is a data garden created by one of the team members from our first ever batch back in 2021. Her name is Kelly. And this is Kelly's data garden titled Lockdown Listening. And it's basically, again, she used very similar concepts and frameworks that we'll cover later on our modules. But she used those concepts to turn her Spotify data into flowers. And so this, I believe, was, so every line that goes down is a week of lockdown here in Melbourne. And she used Spotify and Last.fm to track what songs she listened to, and everything from like the number of petals and the size related to how often she played those songs. And so, in similar steps, Kelly made a data-viz project of her own. And so it doesn't have to be flowers, but that will be our goal from now until the end of the course. So if you joined our Module 4 workshop, you would have seen this before, but this is just a snapshot of what the data-viz process would look like from beginning to end. In this video specifically, I will take you through how I kind of journey through those steps, and it'll be similar to what you will learn in modules 4 to 6. Okay, so the first step of the process is coming up with theme and story and data set, right? So in our class back then, in Karen Ann's class, she instructed us to create this. So this is basically a WIP document containing kind of like basically our game plan for what we wanted to do for our data-viz project. And so I'll basically take you through it really quickly in what elements there is inside. So the first is, of course, the idea. So what is the data narrative? What is the story? What is the theme that you want to raise? What question do you want to ask? Some initial sketches, if you have any, and some visual inspiration from other projects or designers similar to what you want to do. Next is, of course, a game plan, kind of like a timeline or a checklist of what you want to accomplish each week, or even if you're short on time and you're not quite sure, but having even just certain checkpoints, Discord notifications. But having certain checkpoints would be really helpful in making sure that you're continuing on and progressing onwards. And finally, the tools. So what data set do you need for your data-viz project? What sort of tricks or tutorials, what sort of knowledge that you will need to gather in order to build what you want to build. These are kind of just like the data sets that I was working with. So it was basically like a really raw text file of my WhatsApp chat history, which I exported from WhatsApp and then compiled it in Microsoft Excel. And this was kind of my data parsing process of trying to detect, those nuances that I mentioned earlier. And some more sketches of, okay, maybe this is how I want to portray it. And again, what skills and knowledge that I'll need. So we made this way before we even dove into P5. We even did anything with P5. And so I was like, I don't even, and so it's very, very natural for you to be at this stage, I don't know what I don't know, and that's okay. And that's really how it felt when I remember when I was writing this up too. And so that's okay, and that's kind of the whole point. And remember what I said in the intro video that I made way back at the start of this course. One of our philosophies is we learn what we need. You don't need to be an expert in P5. You don't need to have A to Z knowledge on Microsoft Excel or 100% be fully be a full expert on any tool that you'll be using. That's okay. Just focus on getting the information that you need to be able to create what you want and you'll learn plenty. Yeah, so if you followed along our workshop, or even if you didn't, this would be the homework that everyone would bring home. And so I'm extending this to you now, if you're watching this video. Our homework is to create something like this, either in your notebook, if you prefer pen on paper, or in a Google Docs, or any sort of medium that you are most comfortable in and is easiest and most accessible to you. So share your data viz project idea, ideally with all of these elements. So you have your idea or your story, you have visual inspiration, you have a semblance of a checkpoints or a timeline, and the tools that you'll need. So what data set will you need, and what tricks or tutorials will you need? No need to go into too much detail if you don't know, but yet it's just to help you flesh out that game plan for your project. And I'm just scrolling down. So at the very last, of course, is a reference list. So it's, again, super important to keep all of your sources and give proper credit and attribution. So this was kind of like where I would get the tutorials from, or like where I got my inspiration from, things like that. Just keep it on record. That's really important. One thing I'll say is, now looking back, I am so glad that Karen made us do this. I know that when you're in the process as a student, and I kind of also felt this a lot as a design student, each time a lecturer or a professor would tell us to like document your learnings, you kind of get this feeling of like, kind of just like, you can't really be bothered with like documentation. You would rather like just like, dive in and just learn and like just like do stuff and tinker with stuff, and you want to just like, obviously as a student you want to progress as quick as possible, right? But now, as I'm trying to piece things together, documentation has been a lifesaver. Like having all of this still intact, I wouldn't be able to construct this data garden course or like share anything with you guys without those like breadcrumbs that I left back then. And they're not perfect too. So when I was constructing the course, there were a lot of times when I was like, I need to like look up tutorials again, and I need to like figure out, wait, how did I get to there? And like, how did I get to that point? How did I do this? So the better that you can document right now, the easier time your future self will have in referring back to this project. If you want to be creating something similar, if you want to be sharing your knowledge with other people, documentation is what makes all of it possible. So I really, really encourage you to, in that notebook or in that Google Docs or whatever, to keep a constant documentation of your learnings from here on out in the course.